Hey everyone, what's going on? I am Tim Burzens from Amplified Vitality, and in today's video we're going to be discussing how to amplify the youth steroid hormones so that you can get more of the benefits that come from them, things like the higher complex evolved things that humans have, better skin, better hair and nails, more abstract thinking, better digestion, all of the things that happen when you're in the respiratory metabolism, when you're not overloaded with stress and you don't have stress chipping away undermining your very foundation of health. So we're going to dive into all of that good stuff and some really new recommendations that have been really helping a lot of my clients and myself that I'm really excited to share with you. Before we dive into the video, I want to let you all know that the Amplified Vitality monthly newsletter is live on my Patreon account in the About section of this video. The November edition is coming out either today or tomorrow or within the next few days, so you're definitely going to want to check that out. If you're watching this a few days after I post it, then definitely go check out the newsletter because it's something that you're going to want to get on. Now, in addition to that, when you sign up for the newsletter, you will get access to all of the last editions. So right now we have the October edition live. The November edition is going to be dropping within the next day or two. And so you'll have access to both of those. These newsletters have such a deep insight from all of the nutritional stuff that I talk about on this channel, but it goes even further in depth and it helps you kind of understand things on a bigger picture, helps you to dive into some of the actual research studies that I often talk about on this video. I even have a new section where I'm going to be taking certain questions from my YouTube channels that were really good and then expanding them into full articles. So there's a couple of you who have asked really good questions. Those are going to be in the newsletter as well. And they're basically full articles that describe my take on it, how I understand that bigger complex functioning of how health works, how the physiology works, even how evolutionarily it works based on how we have evolved as life forms from the simple anaerobe onto the more complex, all the way up to the primates, and then finally into the human beings. So definitely check that out. It's on my Patreon account, which is in the About section of this video. Now, diving into today's topic, the youth steroids. What are the youth steroids? What am I talking about? These are the steroids that are so important for keeping your respiration high, helping to protect against the stresses that happen, helping to enhance your energy production. When we really understand that stress is about an energy imbalance, it's about your body and your cells being in a situation where they need more energy than they can naturally produce. And so they start to use cheaper and less efficient ways to produce energy, which can help it overcome this immediate stress. This is a great thing. It's very, very necessary for our survival. However, what ends up happening is that the stress gets stayed on for too long. These cheap, inefficient ways of producing fuel continue to be used, and this ends up chipping away at our natural healthy production. So our overall energy production starts to decline, which means we become less resilient to stress. So then when a stress comes on, we now have no energy to come up to meet this stress. And this is where you get that low fatigue, low thyroid, low metabolism, bad skin, hair, nails, the whole rigmarole. Your entire system starts to shut down. Your blood starts to come into your central organs to protect while your hands and your feet get cold. You start to get balding because the extremities aren't getting the sort of the blood supply and the nutrient supply to all of those expanded parts of your body and all of that stuff. Enhancing these youth steroids, things like pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, DHT, and a host of others, and a host of the other metabolites of these major hormones. Boosting these hormones will help your health in almost every single area of your life. And because of that, it is one of our major focuses that we want to achieve with our nutritional regimen, with the routine that we're going to be following. We want to make sure that we're actually promoting the steroids production within the body. Now, in the previous couple of videos, we've been doing a lot of talking about fruit and about the fruit sugars that are in them, specifically fructose and how beneficial fructose can be. But when we look at the scientific data, we can't ignore anything. We have to look at it all, or else we're going to be cherry picking data and trying to come up with our own isolated conclusions that are not in touch with reality, not in touch with the truth of things. So there's all these benefits that are shown from intake of fructose, but there is one caveat, one downside, and I did address this in the video, Sugar is Not the Bad Guy, and that is that sugar can be used to create fat within the liver. And if the liver stores fat, then it starts to slow its functions. You start to lose your drive. You start to get more fatigued and more tired. The liver is really central to all the different systems of the body. So if the liver starts to slow, everything starts to slow and starts to downgrade. So then the question becomes, so then is sugar good or not? Well, it has all these benefits, but it also has the potential to destroy your liver and slow it down. So what do we do here? What's the solution? And the truth is, once you can figure out the context in which sugar, fruit sugar specifically, fructose, exists within our diet and where it actually has the most benefit, not just as an isolated nutrient, but from the bigger picture, from the actual entire dietary regimen, and you look at that and you start to understand its place, now it starts to fall into line, and those benefits are not obscured anymore by this very isolated and narrow thinking, this reductionist thinking that says, well, if it does this, then it must be bad. And the most important nutrient here to start to vindicate sugar from this role, from this narrow-minded role that mainstream nutrition likes to pigeonhole it in, is the nutrient choline. Choline is so important for the diet because it is the nutrient that is most used for exporting fat from the liver into cholesterol for the bloodstream. Now, this is absolutely crucial because what you end up finding is that fatty liver, while sugar and while ethanol and while even fat intake can cause fatty liver, those things can be converted or stored as liver fat in the liver. That actually what is happening is that it's increasing your requirement for choline. And if you're not eating adequate choline, then the liver starts to store the fat. However, if you provide adequate choline, now the liver has plenty of this nutrient to export the fat into cholesterol, and then you don't get fatty liver. Even on very, very high sugar diets or very high fat diets, even on high alcohol diets, which I'm sure no one would consider as a very healthy diet, you can eliminate fatty liver disease by consuming adequate choline. Now, this is super important because, again, the major detriment of sugar, of fructose, is that it can be converted into fat. And if that fat stays in the liver, it will have poor health on the liver. But if you consume adequate choline, there's no liver fat, meaning you get all those benefits we talked about with sugar, including increased thyroid, increased protein retention, increased mineral retention, decreased cortisol, decreased adrenaline, and all these other benefits that we've seen with sugar, while mitigating the effects that it potentially could have against your health by preventing it from storing fat in the liver. Now, this is actually super crucial to understand because the thinking so far has been that if this metabolite, sugar, can cause this disease, fatty liver disease, then therefore this nutrient is bad and we should push it away and avoid sugar forever. However, what we don't realize is that by doing that, we're actually losing a lot of benefits. And maybe we can create a state of non-disease within the body, but a state of non-disease in the body is not the same as a healthy, optimal functioning state, where we're actually thriving and pushing up to higher and higher levels, where we're actually able to feel the most joy and the most alive within our bodies. Living a bland, non-disease state is not the way to go about it. And this is actually what a lot of the hypocalorie life extension people end up finding, is that they live longer, but it's a miserable life. Well, you can have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to deprive yourself and live a terrible life if you want to live longer. And in fact, if you ramp up your health, you will live longer but live a higher quality of life. And this is where these nutrients come into play. And so really what we start to see is that if you consume higher amounts of sugar, then you will, yes, produce more fat from that sugar within the liver. But if you are eating it within the face of a high choline and also a high protein diet, and your liver is able to export that into cholesterol into the blood, now you're creating a stronger stream that's going to ramp up the production of the steroid hormones, these youth steroid hormones that we're talking about, that are so beneficial for your long-term health and create such a solid and stable base of a resilient organism that cannot be shooken by stress. So this is one of the most powerful things we can do. So in order to fully understand this system, we need to look at how the food, specifically when we're talking about this, we're going to be using sugar, how sugar can go all the way through the steps and end up as the steroid hormones. So fructose specifically will go to the liver before it goes to the bloodstream. The liver has to process it. Here, it will get stored as liver glycogen, it will get burned as fuel, some of it gets converted into lactate, some of it will get stored as liver fat. It's actually a very small amount that gets stored as liver fat. However, for people who are in the low metabolism state, liver glycogen storage is not working the way that it should. And so you're not going to be able to store as much liver glycogen. And a big reason for this is that your liver is being taxed so heavily because of all the stress of your body is weighing on the liver. The liver is the one that provides for the rest of the body, so to speak. So the liver is constantly being taxed, and whenever you consume the carbs, it is not able to store them as glycogen. So in this low metabolism state, you're actually a little more susceptible to fatty liver because you're not going to be able to store it as glycogen, and so it will instead get converted into fat. Now, as fat in the liver, choline will combine with it, turn it into cholesterol, release it into the blood. So far, so good. But the question you might be having is, what if you have high cholesterol and you don't want to continue to bump up your cholesterol? Well, cholesterol in the blood is not specifically a bad thing. And in fact, there are plenty of people with high cholesterol who are way healthy, and plenty of people with normal cholesterol who are actually at risk for heart disease because they're in a high inflammatory state. It's not so simple to just say high cholesterol is bad and low cholesterol is good. It's absolutely not the case. However, especially when we're talking about the steroid hormones, when you're able to produce this cholesterol, and assuming that you have high thyroid and plenty of vitamin A, thyroid, vitamin A, and this LDL cholesterol will combine to create pregnenolone, which is the mother of all steroid hormones. Pregnenolone is the hormone that then gets converted into either progesterone or into DHEA. Progesterone can go down its own path, DHEA can go down its own path. The DHEA can get converted into things like testosterone and DHT and androstenedione and all of these other really, really powerful hormones. So the more that you can create pregnenolone, it's basically like the more raw fuel you're giving your body within the steroid line to use it how it wants and to promote these different things. Now, the more pregnenolone you have, you're actually going to be signaling more of these beneficial hormones rather than getting it converted down into the stress steroid hormones, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So the real key takeaway from understanding that flow through the system from sugar into liver glycogen or liver fat, into cholesterol, and then into the steroid hormones is to recognize that if you cut out sugar, then maybe you won't be at higher risk for the fatty liver, which really just means that you have a higher choline requirement. But you're also reducing the flow through this stream, and so you're going to be reducing the end products of those steroid hormone synthesis. And this is super important to understand. What we actually see is that as you are able to consume more sugar, storing more of it as glycogen and helping to repair your liver growth, and you're also consuming adequate choline, and like I said, also adequate protein as well, because protein can be used to help create choline if you need more of it. Then you're able to produce plenty of cholesterol, you're able to keep your liver lean, and you're continually supplying your liver with the possibility of holding on to more glycogen. And this is all super important because the liver glycogen storage is directly related to the conversion of T3, the active thyroid hormone, within your body. So the thyroid gland actually only releases a little bit of T3. It releases mostly T4, which is the inactive hormone. The liver and some of the other organs like the kidneys are actually responsible for the majority of the conversion into the active form. So what this really does is gives your body a kind of checks and balances system where if the liver is not really optimally functioning and it's not storing glycogen, which means that times are tough and there's not a lot of carbohydrate, not a lot of high octane fuel to be used, that it won't convert it into the active form. It won't ramp metabolism up. And like we said, because active thyroid hormone is so important for creating the youth state, for creating the abundant state, if the active thyroid is not there, then you won't be able to create this active, abundant, youthful state. So there's this perfect checks and balances system that's going on. And if you can't store liver glycogen, you're not going to be converting thyroid. However, if you continue to eat the sugar, you're continually giving your liver the signal, store this glycogen, convert the thyroid, everything's good. If you don't consume the choline, yes, now you're at risk for fatty liver. If you consume the choline, now you're getting the win-win situation. You're getting this better liver health and this better thyroid conversion while you're also converting more of it into cholesterol. Well, now let's think about that there. Creating more liver glycogen and more thyroid hormone and then exporting any fat into cholesterol. Well, what are the requirements for steroid hormone synthesis? Cholesterol and thyroid hormone. Right there, from sugar and choline intake combined, you're getting the thyroid hormone and that cholesterol. Now, of course, you need vitamin A as well, but that's part of making sure that you're consuming whole foods, which we're going to come back to in a minute. But right now, I really want to tie this into the bigger picture and the evolutionary picture so we can start to see how it is that this makes perfect sense within the bigger scheme of things and the bigger way that we've evolved and the physio-environmental reactions that are happening within the totality of the area that we are in. And to look at that, we can understand that all primates, chimps, monkeys, apes, all of them will preferentially consume fruit. Even if it's not available, they'll go looking for fruit before they will eat other foods. This means that clearly fruit is a staple of their diet, and they are the last, most recent step of complexity before the humans. The humans have taken one more step of complexity from the primates, but we are still physiologically, from a bodily perspective, very, very close to the monkeys. Now, this does not mean that we should eat exactly what the monkeys eat. We've, of course, adapted so that we can now have a much greater variety of foods, and because of our intelligence, we probably need more protein intake, and we need more choline and cholesterol and things like that. All of that perfectly makes sense, but especially when we're in the low metabolism state, we want to take a step back in complexity, back to a more simple form, seeing how that diet works to come back to our roots, so to speak. Once we heal at this level, now we can start adding in those different foods that maybe we need to adapt to. You know, monkeys don't really eat a lot of grains. Humans can eat grains, and it's not necessarily that it's going to kill you or that it's bad for you. If you're in a healthy state, grains can be worth it. You know, you can actually get some benefit out of them, but they're not the core diet. Coming back to the core diet helps you heal, helps you come back to this really abundant, thriving state where you're so resilient to the environment that you could eat something like grains and be fine. But if you're in that low metabolism state, it's very likely that you wouldn't be able to eat this variety of foods. You're going to get these allergies and your body's going to have these autoimmune responses. All of it because the stress is too much, the energy production is too much, you're not resilient enough, you don't have enough barrier function against the environment, and so therefore you're susceptible and you can't have those foods. Coming back to this core diet, what you're really supposed to eat evolutionarily from how we've evolved will help you heal, and that's what's important to understand. So these primates will eat fruit at any expense. They will try to find this fruit, and the staple of their diet is fruit. Now, in addition to that, the next 3 sources of foods that they eat are insects, eggs, and total animals, especially their organ meats. Well, when we look at the choline concentration of these 3 different food sources, what we find is that they're all very, very high in choline. Insects are actually higher than any other animal, higher than even the brain, which is the most choline concentrated source. And insects would have played a very important nutritional role in the diet of a primate. Now, behind that is eggs and egg yolks. Egg yolks are super high in cholesterol and choline. They are one of the primary sources in our modern diet. And then behind that is the organ meats, things like liver. Liver is very, very high in choline. All these foods are very high in choline. And if you're eating a high fruit diet that contains a lot of fructose, then eating that in addition to these other animal sources that have choline would ensure that that fructose is getting converted into cholesterol and therefore getting converted into the steroid hormones and basically physiologically showing you that the environment is abundant. And in fact, in the abundant state, in the summertime, the springtime, when fruit is growing very, very abundantly, and we could go out and just pick fruit off and be eating it, plenty of fruit sugar being intaken along with the potassium and the B vitamins and the antioxidants and all the things I talked about in my recent video, then at the same time, there would be lots of insects. Have you noticed that in the winter, there aren't bugs just flying around all over the place? In the spring and the summer, they're everywhere. You would be eating them as a primate. In addition to that, birds are laying eggs. You would find these eggs and you would eat them. And in fact, I'll link below a video of a monkey eating an egg, and there's something about it that kind of triggers something primal in you where you realize, yeah, that makes sense that a monkey would be eating an egg as far as part of its protein source. And then beyond that, a very low percentage for primate diet is eating other animals, but that would also primarily be the organ meats that it eats, and then the muscle meats would be very secondary. And so we'd be getting a much different amino acid profile, but more importantly, we would be getting a lot of choline. In this abundant state, lots of fructose, lots of choline, lots of steroid hormone production. So the monkeys would have this idea that the environment is very, very good, times are good, ramp up all the high complex functionings, recharge the battery, keep the cells working optimally. In the scarce state, not so many fruits, not so many insects, not so many animals. Birds wouldn't be laying eggs because why would they? They don't have enough food. Of course they're not going to be laying eggs. And so the monkey would be eating smaller, nuts and seeds and searching for these tiny little pieces of food because it needs food. So it, of course, is going to search for whatever it can. So when you start to understand this, all of these things, all these pieces start to fall into place within this broader context of how it all works. Now, does this mean that you have to add in liver and start eating insects and start, getting cricket flour or eating larvae or anything like that? Of course not. You don't have to add those things to your diet at all. I think that it could be something that's worth experimenting with, and it could be very interesting. I've heard that cricket powder, cricket flour, is great for baking, really high in protein and obviously really high in choline, and that it actually tastes really good. Maybe you're squeamish and you don't like that. Either way, it's totally fine. A lot of people don't like liver. Some people do. I will say that I think there's an acquired taste that happens when your body starts to recognize this taste and connect it with the nutrition that it gives you, and therefore your body starts to crave it. So that's worth noticing as well. However, we can accomplish this with eggs and egg yolks. And specifically, by understanding this broader paradigm, we can isolate the specific nutrients that we need. And so by doing that, we can increase the intake of the foods that contain those nutrients. Now, a really important point here is that the one thing that's going to pop into almost all of your minds is, well, can I just supplement with choline? And the answer is yes, it has its place. Supplementation certainly has its place, but it's definitely not your first go-to. And the reason is because you don't want to isolate an individual nutrient saying that this one thing is going to be the one thing that cures me and solves my problems. You want to recognize that no nutrient operates in isolation. Nutrients are always found in the context of food, which means that the nutrient contains similar like nutrients that are involved in its metabolism and its breakdown and help it to operate more efficiently, more synergistically. So for example, choline in egg yolks is found in the form phosphatidylcholine, which is great for the liver. It is also paired with phosphatidylethynolamine. It comes with cholesterol within the lecithin portion of it, and a ton of other phospholipids. So if you just go out and take choline bitartrate, you're not getting nearly the same kind of physiological state that you would if you consumed it from eating egg yolks. And here's another really important point. Egg yolks have vitamin A. It's almost as if this food were made for us to eat, that literally you have the choline that releases the cholesterol into the blood, and this food also has the vitamin A that now that you've been eating the fruit and your thyroid's high, the vitamin A, the thyroid, and the cholesterol all combine to create the steroid hormones because you're eating a lot of fruit and you're eating a lot of choline sources. It makes perfect sense. The entire system flows once we start to view it through this lens. Now, having said that, yes, choline supplementation can help. I would always take it with a choline food though, so that your body is digesting that sort of nutrient already. And in addition to that, I would also choose supplements that are closer towards the whole food type of model anyway. So for example, I wouldn't supplement with choline bitartrate, I would supplement with egg yolk lecithin, which contains the phosphatidylethynolamine, contains the cholesterol and the other phospholipids, along with phosphatidylcholine. And so by taking it in that form, you get a much more natural source of it. When you take that with the eggs that you're already eating, now your body is basically eating more eggs. That's what your body's getting the signal of. And so it's going to increase steroid production. And as a little side note that just popped in my head as I'm saying that, there was a bodybuilder, I can't remember where I heard this, but there was a bodybuilder who basically said that eating 20 eggs a day would basically mimic the effects of taking endogenous anabolic steroids. And in fact, that seems to be the case if you're keeping your sugar high and you're able to export all the fat and create enough cholesterol and actually convert it into the steroids, then it would make sense that you would actually be ramping that up to levels that maybe wouldn't rival anabolic steroids, but at least would be very much more resilient system, much better muscle growth, much more fat loss, and all those great benefits that we really want to achieve. Now, the very last point that I want to bring up here is, what about fat intake? If you're eating fat, then wouldn't that get stored equally as fat in the liver or equally be converted into cholesterol and create the steroid hormones? And the answer is yes. We've actually found in the research that having a higher saturated and monounsaturated fat intake results in higher testosterone production, higher steroid hormone production. But you got to think about that for a second, because what's happening is that you're consuming it as it's already in its fat form. And therefore, if you have adequate thyroid and vitamin A and choline to turn it into the cholesterol, then you can convert it into the steroid hormones. By supplying more of the reactant in the chemical reaction, you push the reaction towards the products, which means that as you add more fat and cholesterol into your blood, you're naturally going to be pushing more towards the steroid hormones and creating more of them. But when you're doing that from consuming more fat, you're not getting the liver glycogen and you're not getting the thyroid hormone. And so you run into the risk of just getting stuck with high cholesterol without being able to convert it. And in fact, I think a lot of high cholesterol cases probably come from poor liver glycogen, which means poor thyroid hormone, and too much fat intake within the diet that's not actually getting used the way it should. It doesn't mean that fat intake's bad at all. It just means that you need to make sure your thyroid is high and that your vitamin A is adequate. And the best way to do that is to consume it from a whole food source that has all the nutrients paired in the proper proportions that will be best beneficial for your body. And to continue with that idea, understanding that adding more cholesterol through the intake of fat will push more towards the steroid hormones. Well, when you take endogenous steroid hormones like the anabolic steroids, what happens is that you push so much of the products that now you're not going to be converting your cholesterol into those steroid hormones. So instead, what happens is that your blood cholesterol starts to go up. And people who take anabolic steroids tend to find this. Their blood cholesterol ends up raising because their body's not going to be producing testosterone and other steroid hormones on its own. So it's not using the cholesterol. So it's just accumulating in the blood. Well, now let's go back another step. Accumulated cholesterol in the blood. Well, now your liver is not going to want to let go of its liver fat into the blood because it's already sensing that the liver is, or the blood is already full of cholesterol. If the blood's already full of cholesterol, it doesn't want to release its fat. So now we have fatty liver. And what we find is that people who take anabolic steroids have fatty liver. And literally you can see how this step-by-step process happens through this flow of the anabolic steroids. And so by understanding that flow and understanding that system, we see that eating lots of fruit and lots of fruit sugars and lots of choline from things like eggs or liver or even insects, if you wanted to do that, will create the strongest flow through the system while providing all the nutrients that it needs. On the one side, we get the fructose, we have potassium, we have the B vitamins and the antioxidants that help to protect the metabolism and energy producing pathways. And we have the fiber, which helps to push through the digestive tract. Then on the other side, we have these animal products that are full of protein and full of choline. They're full of a little bit more fat, so they have all the fat soluble vitamins, including vitamin A. And then we really see that pairing them this way creates this perfect flow. Now, the way that I like to recommend to do it is to have that fruit fasting portion of the day, like I've talked about, where you mostly consume fruit and some other sugars. And then in the afternoon, in the early or late afternoon, having 3 to 4 eggs every single day. Now, again, you can also do organ meats like liver, or if you are game for it, you can try out the insect powder and the other forms of insects that have now been started to market as food products. But regardless, you're getting that choline, and if you want to supplement with some egg yolk lecithin on top of that, then you're going to get even more of this choline that's helping you. Because that comes with vitamin A, and because the sugar is helping to refill the thyroid hormone, over time of continual eating the fruit and then having the eggs and then having your later mixed meal at night, fruit and then eggs and then mixed meal at night, fruit and then eggs and mixed meal at night, liver glycogen is going to slowly start restoring. All of the fat's going to be released into cholesterol in the blood and get converted into those steroid hormones. And what you're doing is starting to recharge your system, get that flow going, get the energy flowing through your system. And it's going to result in an increased level of energy and vitality and health and well-being and brain function and digestive system and sex drive and skin, hair, nails, and beauty and all those things that we want to happen. So fruit and eggs, fructose and choline, key parts of the diet, you got to include them. This has been a long video. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please make sure you sign up for my newsletter in the About section on my Patreon account. The new November edition is coming out soon. Please like this video, share it with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Click that subscribe button because I'm going to have a lot more of this amazing content coming out. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I hope that you got a lot out of this video. Eat your fruit, eat your eggs, be healthy. Peace.